Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And now, by the way, people in Denver will say, well, Peyton Manning just can't beat Bill Belichick. He just can't do it, even though he beat him in the AFC Championship game last year. It's just the nature. Football is such an emotional sport, and it's such an event because you only play once a week. The wins and losses become bigger than they really should be. But New England proved a lot of things in this game because I thought Denver was the better team. I thought Peyton Manning has the better supporting cast. I thought that defense is much improved. And New England went out and waxed them.
Yeah,
and they've been a completely different team since Rob Gronkowski's gotten healthy. He has really turned it on and become the old Gronk again, and that sets up so many other things for New England offensively, because that makes things easier for Brandon LaFell outside. It makes things easier for Julian Edelman.
I think
it makes things easier for Shane Vereen, everybody.
I think I'm not trying to cut you off. You said Edelman. I think he's one of the keys, too. He's finally starting to – he was the invisible man. Trust me, I had him in my fantasy league, and I had to cut him because he was the invisible man. Like, what happened to Julian Edelman here? But he, the last few weeks, has started to read Brady. He also had the big return yesterday, too, which was – I'm watching that thing go, and it turn ever because you could know they were trucking down the field, but it just broke down in real time, and it looked like a slow replay. It was the way it went, but it was a beautiful return there. And but I think Edelman a big piece of that there too. And I love it. I love the frustration as a fantasy football guy of using guys from the Patriots because from week to week, Bill Belichick says, maybe I'll throw Jonas Gray at you. Maybe I'll hand it to Shane Vereen. I don't know, man. Whatever running back I feel like giving it to, man. Just a piece of advice, man. Stay away from New England running backs when you're in fantasy football because Bill Belichick doesn't care about you at all. He doesn't care about your fantasy league, man. All he's going to do...
Nor should he. Nor should he.
I know, of course. I'm having some fun with it.
But, you bring up Julian Edelman. One of the issues with him was the fact that, people kind of understood when Gronkowski wasn't out there that or even when he wasn't 100%, people kind of figured out that Edelman was the only receiver Tom Brady trusted. So, opposing defenses started jumping every route because they know he doesn't have great deep speed. So they're able to. His strength as a receiver is a route runner. So people started jumping everything, and it became much more difficult for him. And now can't do it. Because Gronkowski's running at 100%, he's killing people, and killing people down the seam, and that's brought Tim Wright into the offense. He didn't do much yesterday, but weeks prior, he's been playing at a high level. And LaFell, all of a sudden,
LaFell,
it's turned into a competent receiver. So Brady went from trusting one guy in Edelman when Gronkowski was not out there. Now he trusts four and is even getting Danny Amendola involved again. So New England, despite some serious injuries on the defensive side of the ball, they're just getting better and better.
Yeah, meanwhile, on the other side, Denver, a lot of it was Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders on offense. The majority, I believe 70% of Peyton's pass yardage came to those two. How about the last few weeks for Emmanuel Sanders, man? He's a good season overall, but, he's really starting to emerge there in that offense.
Well, everybody... we constantly talk about all the receivers that Peyton Manning has made over the years, and Emmanuel Sanders was happy with a lark. And remember he played with a pretty good quarterback in Pittsburgh. Who's thrown 12 touchdown passes in 2 weeks. But if you're a receiver long term over 16 games, there's no quarterback you'd rather play for than Peyton Manning because you're going to get the football.
That's right, and you're going to get paid somewhere, either here or somewhere else. Like Eric Deckman's another one we got to talk about. Dallas, Arizona, sound victory there, 28-17, and not even as close as that score would make it seem. Good good performance once again for the Cardinals as they just continue to show that they're for real. Ellington gives them a great running game. They were playing well even without Palmer, but Carson Palmer gives them that steady presence. 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception yesterday for him as the quarterback. And Brandon Weeden, did for himself, as far as being the quarterback of that team with Tony Romo not playing at game time. Murray, less than his usual here, still nearly 100 yards. But were you surprised that Arizona handled the Cowboys, even with as they did?
No, I mean, I wasn't surprised. It would have been much more difficult, obviously, if Romo had played. But, Arizona is what they are. It's a very, very good defensive team. Despite some injuries they don't have John Abraham. They don't have Darrell Washington, who's suspended. They don't have Darnell Dockett, who's injured. But Todd Bowles is going to turn himself into an NFL head coach because that defense is still, playing at a very, very high level. And they have the best record in the NFL this late in the season for the first time since 1974. So it's been 40 years. Bruce Arians has just been, we might start calling the Coach of the Year the Bruce Arians Award.
Sure.
Because he's just ever since he took over in Indianapolis when Chuck Pagano got sick and did such a fabulous job there, and he goes to Arizona. They were 10-6 last year. I think people tend to forget that because they were the only double-digit win team that didn't make the playoffs. And this year it looked like it was a disaster looming because they were in such a tough division on paper, and they lost all those guys. They didn't have Washington. He's probably their best defensive player. They lost Dockett. They lost Abraham. And all of a sudden they're 7-1. And, yeah, they took advantage of the situation and the fact that obviously the Cowboys aren't nearly as difficult to play without Tony Romo. But it's still an impressive win. And the fact that they were able to stop DeMarco Murray's 100-game streak. They haven't given up a 100-yard rusher in 18 games. So they're a very good defense. And they stopped, by and large, the best running back and the best offensive line in football yesterday.
Absolutely. A couple of other ones, surprises, I think. How about Miami? I mean, we knew they were an improved team, and I liked what San Diego had been doing here, but, man, that was a pasting yesterday. I know my son plays in our fantasy football league. He had Phillip Rivers, got him 1 point yesterday. He's like, Dad, how in the world does your quarterback only get you 1 point? I said, man, apparently when he played the Dolphins yesterday, because that one was ugly. Did you see that one coming? Because I thought San Diego, I mean, I know they had the next man up and in, but man, I didn't like that.
Dolphins' defense is legit, and it starts up front with Cam Wake, and they have one of the top 5 defenses in football. The thing with Miami is obviously the quarterback, and when the quarterback plays well, like he did yesterday, they can beat anybody because their defense is going to keep them in most games. You never expect, obviously, 37-0, and San Diego. But those West Coast teams, we always talk about those West Coast teams that have to come east and vice versa. It never seems to work out well. People don't handle that time differential well going either direction. So I think it was all it all was a perfect storm. The fact that the Dolphins defense is so tough, they're obviously playing at home, and Tannehill got hot. And if Tannehill plays well, as I said, the Dolphins are really, really difficult to deal with. The problem there, though, is he lacks consistency from week to week, which is the issue with a lot of young quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you're right. You got that right about that defense, by the way. But speaking of the other team in that game, how about San Diego? They've now lost 3 in a row, and that one yesterday was the worst Chargers loss are obviously a downward trend in the middle part of the season. Do you see the bottom kind of dropping out here for the Chargers, or are they able to fix some holes and keep this ship afloat?
Well, I think, I don't think I don't think the floor is going to fall out from under him only because, Phillip Rivers is too good. Obviously he had a difficult time yesterday, but that's not going to continue. And he's the exact opposite of a guy like Tannehill. More often than not, he's going to play, probably 13 out of 16 relatively good games. So I don't think they're going to completely fall off a cliff, but obviously they have to stop the bleeding. They lost 2 straight division games before that. They lost to Kansas City and Denver, so I think that's even more concerning. And now they've lost 3 straight against AFC, and that'll hurt, once you talk about the wild card, and the tiebreakers for that. So they're going to have to stop the bleeding soon. I think they're a good enough team that they'll be able to do it. But what looked like a sure playoff berth certainly looks anything but right now for the Chargers.
They're in the pack with a whole bunch of teams there. And let's wrap it up in the division. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, we kind of brushed on Ben Roethlisberger. I think he tied the NFL record with 12 touchdown passes in 2 games with the 6 in back-to-back games. Huge offensive game. Clearly not the game you would have expected after seeing these teams play each other before, but yesterday it was all Pittsburgh all the time in that one.
Yeah, and they've figured something out over the past number of games, and the fact that, we all knew about Antonio Brown, but now that they got Bryant and Wheaton involved and those guys, all of a sudden it's becoming more and more difficult. And Le'Veon Bell had his worst game of the season yesterday, but it didn't matter. And it didn't look like it was going to be a 6-touchdown game early. I mean, Baltimore had control of the game early in the first quarter until a turnover kind of shifted things, and the snowball started going downhill.
Pittsburgh.
The most impressive thing to me, though, was where did James Harrison got the fountain of youth? He was just flying around.
That, John, I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not gonna lie. I've got some suspicions about that one, man. He found the fountain.
Yeah, you're not the only one. You and I know that but I know that going in. You don't think anybody on the other team is doing those same types of things?
I'm glad you said that, because I saw him out there last night, and I've seen him for the last few weeks here, and I'm like, get out of here. You don't go from I'm at the house sipping pina coladas and hanging out with the kids to playing at that level that quickly, man. There's a reason you weren't playing at that level in Cincinnati. I'm just saying there's something fishy in the water in Pittsburgh. That's all I'm going to say about that one, man. And you're right. You talk about a slow start. Pittsburgh didn't score until halfway through the second quarter, and they still put those 6 touchdowns on the board, man. I think Bryant's a big one. Him and as you said, Wheaton, those two adding the weapons there. But
I'll tell you, if you weren't looking at their heads and their faces, you could switch uniforms, and James Harrison and Terrell Suggs would look like the same person.
Dude, how's that happen?
So they might have the same doctor, wink, wink. But every single team has guys that are using stuff, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything. But I don't even think about that because it's just part of the sport.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I don't know, man. Be a good test of the first if people were so inclined to think that way. I'm not accusing anybody of anything either. I'm just saying I want to meet his doctor because I need some medical advice myself. John,
well, don't count on that testing, creating much of a change, because you and I know how that is a red herring. That test.
I'm just saying. I just need some
virtually
generic,
useless. And it's not going to catch any
medical advice for a friend. So if anybody knows who James Harrison's physician is, I've just got a question. That's all. McMullen from the Sports Network. Always a great time. Good week in the NFL. We got another one coming up. Quickly, do you think the Browns go make a game of this and maybe surprise some people this Thursday in prime time?
Well, I think that I think they can make a game. Well, I don't think you expect to win. This is we always talk about logical losses, and the bottom line is this is a team that's 13 in its last 14 at home. It's a short week, which usually favors the home team. Everything, is geared towards Cincinnati in this game.